Jennifer, I will tell you real quick before I know we're recording, but before we officially jump in, when he bought my book that's coming out in July, he talked to me for like 15, 20 minutes about, what he liked and, what he would improve, because I was originally submitting it somewhere else and he was just taking a look at it for me. So 20 minutes he had me on the hook before he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, I want the story." It's like, that's very him, so casual nonchalance.
Yeah, I'm just gonna totally change your world with just one brief sentence out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Welcome to Dead Headspace, a part of Silver Shamrock Horrorcast, a podcast network. That includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock. I'm going to start over. I was trying not to laugh with you two laughing. Well, Jennifer.
You didn't even take a second. You were ready to launch.
I thought I could do it. Thought I could capture that spirit. Dun-dun-sh. Welcome to Dead Headspace, now a part of Silver Shamrock Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Unburying the Dead, where Brennan, Ken McKinley, and myself exhume classic horror paperbacks for the new generation. New episodes come on and air, every first of every month. Speaking of Silver Shamrock, they have this lovely box set. You can find them on their website. I believe it is silvershamrock.com, silvershamrockpublishing.com. And all you have to do is go to the book box. I'm so bad. Can't even get through a fucking intro.
That's okay.
I never do this anymore. I'm so sorry.
No. You know what? I was going to throw that out there. It's been 30 episodes since we had to do a third take of the intro, so no worries, man.
It must be my powers or something, throwing things off.
Right now, I'm drinking, audio listeners. You cannot see this. I'm holding up the current flavor. It's a little blurry. Stupid camera. It's called Bones. It's by Bones Coffee. S'more time. Clearly, I can't speak English either. It is delicious. Tastes exactly what it sounds like a s'mores infused with coffee. I like it. I've also had the jelly donut flavor, and I'm not a fan of jelly donuts, but they go with a few different breweries for their coffee. Check them out. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Ghana, and all other major platforms, which now includes YouTube. That's right. You can now watch your favorite episodes, including this one. All you have to do is search Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're joined by author Jennifer Soucy. Say hi, Jennifer.
Hey, everyone.
And Brennan, would you like to start us off with the baseline question?
Absolutely. I'm going to knock it out in one take. Watch this, man.
You son
Jennifer,
of a bitch.
We like to ask all our first-time guests, what got you into horror?
Oh, well, that's a pretty easy one. What got me into horror was definitely my grandmother, because she used to read to me, and it was always super dark, twisted fairy tales, like the original ones. And right from the beginning, I totally loved those stories, even though they were gruesome and probably should have scared the hell out of me. But from there, it was just dark fiction head on, whether it was movies, books, anything. And I know I've disappointed my mother quite a bit with that, because she thought I was going to grow out of it, and find something normal for a hobby. It just never happened.
I love that answer. The whole idea of having it start at such a young age, because that's you're being kind of immersed in it. You're being told stories that don't necessarily have that happy ending, because those grim fairy tales, those get real dark if you go with the originals. Now, is that just something you kind of remember back to fondly, and you're like, oh, maybe that's where I got it? Or do you feel like that caused you to just go looking for more?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, because those were the best stories ever. Like, and I like Disney too. I loved fairy tales in general, but of course the Disney versions are much brighter. But yeah, it was without those dark tales, I would not have gone looking for even darker stuff. Because I was reading, well, I was watching like in the 80s, like these crazy dark fantasy movies that were pretty much horror movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching, but I did. And then as soon as I could, I was getting out adult horror novels and ghost stories and anything I get my hands on from the library. So, it's been a thing, and it's just gotten stronger and stronger the older I get. I just can't help it. I love it.
What made you jump from being a consumer to being a creator?
Well, I always liked writing. It was once something I was good at in school. And when I was 12, my mother, she got me a typewriter, like kind of like one of those old-fashioned typewriters with the tape and everything. And she was like, now you can write your stories here. And I was like, God, I never really thought about writing stories, but okay. So I started writing this horrible. I don't even remember what I wrote, which is probably a good thing. But I wrote this horrible epic. Like it was like V.C. Andrews meets Stephen King meets Anne Rice, which of course at the time were all my favorite authors. But it was god awful. And it's a good thing it doesn't exist anymore. But after that, I mean, it was just in school, I was writing all the time, and I was gonna keep going with it. But, when you become an adult, you have to get a job and you got to do all this other stuff. And a lot of your hobbies, no matter how much you love them, you kind of got to give them up for a while. And that's what unfortunately happened for me for many years.
Adulting is sincerely overrated.
It really is.
Patrick, throw it to you, buddy.
Well, back to the Disney horror versions. You know what? I wish I could say this was 100% accurate, but I did hear that Cinderella, which is from the late 1600s, another French tale like Beauty and the Beast, but that her toes were cut off so they could fit in the glass slipper.
Oh, it's not even that. And it's not Cinderella, thankfully, because she is our heroine. We wouldn't want her to get hurt. It's the stepsisters.
Mm.
When the prince comes, and it was a fur slipper in the old fairy tales, not a glass one. When he comes with the shoe, and they can already tell looking at it that there's no way my big ass foot's gonna fit in that shoe. One of them slices off her toes, and the other stepsister, she slices off her own heel and puts the shoe on. So there's, I mean, blood and whatever else. And I guess everyone else was fine with that. I mean, no one said anything to them like, "What are you doing? God, stop!" you know.
It is interesting that like this is so random, but like guys like Walt Disney or Quentin Tarantino, they're students of what they love, the genre or industry that they love, and I mean they kind of reimagine the story. It's a remake, but centuries later, it's so cool. You know what? I'm real curious if there's any authors like that. I've never thought of that. If there's any authors out there that are remaking old tales and kind of not saying it's their own version, but
Mhm.
putting their own spin on it.
Oh, I think people do all the time. I mean, there's all sorts of reimaginings and retellings are very popular. And some are definitely more creative than others. I've read some, that being really excited to read it, and then I read it and I'm like, oh, it's essentially the same story. So that's less cool. But when they really do something different with it, then that's super fun. Like I've read so many stories with like mythological themes or even fairy tale themes that who does a really good one is it's not necessarily horror, but it's definitely super dark fantasy, is Sarah J. Maas does some really good retellings. Like her A Court of Thorn and Roses is basically Beauty and the Beast, but with evil fairies. And it's super good. And it gets really better too. And there's a new one coming out, so I'm dying to read it.
Is there any story, it could be Disney or any older story, that you would not necessarily write yourself, but would like to see something reimagined in a completely different way where it captures the core of that older story?
I mean, any of them. Any of the fairy tales, anything from mythology, as long as it's done, not like a direct retelling. Because again, if you already like the original, a direct retelling is not very imaginative, and you're probably not going to live up to like the original author. But if you can do something cool with it and a twist, I will be there. I will read it. I don't even care. I love it all.
Saw today that there's a remake on Train to Busan, and that came out only 2016. I look, I don't, I'm not one of these people that don't like remakes, but that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like sometimes remakes happen, and it's like there's how many? I mean, I'm not a huge comic book fan person, but how many Spider-Mans do we need back to back? I mean, come on. I know he's a great character, but still, we could slow him down a little bit, right?
I like the original too.
The ones with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, the third one never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, my nieces made me watch that. They liked him too. And I have not watched the new ones, but one of my nieces is totally in love with that kid that's playing him. I forget what his name is. It's like Tom Holland, I think.
Yeah, Tom Holland, which
Hmm.
there's like three other famous Tom Hollands. One's in horror. He's, I think, a director. I forget who the other one or two are. You know what? I want to throw this question. You should think about it and give it a second. But if I were to redo a few older stories, we're talking from the late 19th century, I got three. The Gingerbread Man, where it would be a splatter, and maybe this is already done. I don't know. Where it would be a splatter punk on. I have a bad eating habit. It's worse than I could kick smoking cigarettes. I kicked drinking like a fish, but fucking eating sugar, man. I mean,
Sugar's the worst drug that there is.
so I would have the splatterpunk version where it's something to do with that, where it's kind of like take it any way you want, but that'd be a fun way, maybe. Or you could do like Jack and the Beanstalk. There could be a million things with that. And the
Hmm.
third one was, and I can't remember it. I don't remember. Lost it. Brendan, what would you do?
What like fairy tale would I reimagine?
If you could, yeah, if you could pick like any older story to kind of reimagine it.
Oh shit, down the rabbit hole we go, man.
That's a good
I don't
one.
know.
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, okay, Alice in Wonderland, let's do it.
Well, and you know, though, the Gingerbread Man, it kind of like it's like Shrek gave an opening to a splatterpunk retelling or reimagining of the Gingerbread Man, getting his gumdrop buttons ripped off, getting his leg torn off. I mean, come on, like it's there. The audience is there for that already.
I love Shrek. It's such a fun movie.
It is such a fun movie.
Have you guys happened to go down to get Universal Studios to ride Shrek 4D? I don't know if it's still there. It's been quite a while since I've been to Universal.
No, I live crazy close to Florida too. Well, I mean, not crazy close. It's like an 8-hour drive to Orlando. But I still have not gone to Disney World, Universal, anything like that. I really, really want to, though. It's definitely a bucket list trip.
It's fun. Well, the Shrek ride, I mean, I was a little kid when we went, but my dad was cracking up the whole time. That and the Muppets, the two old men.
I love them.
Now I think that he was laughing because it's probably him, and I didn't get that as a kid until right now. But yeah, yeah, Florida, I don't know what else. There's a whole lot of fun stuff to do in Florida, but Disney World's a hell of a fun time. It's expensive. I mean, they
Yeah.
clearly will bleed you dry, but it's fun.
It can't be worse than Six Flags. We've been to the one in Atlanta a few times, and it's horrible. But I will say, and I don't even do it anymore. They only did it at least the one time that we went. On Halloween, they had an Alice Cooper themed haunted house.
Really?
It was the best haunted house I've ever been to, and I'm sorry for my sister who I know is going to watch this, but I'm totally telling on you. She peed her pants. She was that scared.
She legitimately pissed herself?
Yes, we had to go on the water ride after, so that way her pants would get covered up.
That is
It's a
fantastic.
creative solution. It is.
And
It's good.
I should also add we were adults, so it's not like she was like 5.
You're in so much trouble right now.
I love Alice Cooper. Him and Ozzy.
I know. Yeah.
Kind of a fan of Dio. I don't know. He's hot and cold sometimes. But hey, let's switch gears to Clementine's Awakening.
Is that so that nobody can pick on you for not liking Dio?
No, I mean I like
why
Dio.
You switch gears so quickly?
No, I like. Okay, fine. You want to talk about? I like Dio.
No. It's Jennifer and I will talk about the book. You go listen to Holy Diver and come back when you've learned your lesson.
No. Look.
In the dark.
Rainbow in the Dark, yes.
That's on the same album, I think. You know what? He's good. I like him, but he's no Ozzy and he's no Alice Cooper. I also like Dee Snider a whole lot too.
Oh. Well, that's okay.
All right, so look at what you're making me do. I'm making Jennifer not like my taste in music. So let's go.
No, she picked up a lot faster than we've seen other guests. That in order to be comfortable on this show, you have to rip on Patrick. It's a rite of passage.
That's not true. I'm gonna go back to me doing the show by myself. Clementine's Awakening. Brennan, you want to lead the way with that, sir?
Yeah, I mean, before we jump into the book itself, I want to talk about the setting. The biggest thing that jumped out to me right from page 1 is just how alive you made Savannah feel. Now, you're in Atlanta, which, correct me if my geography is horrific, but that's on the other side of the state from Savannah, isn't it?
Well, it's a good distance away. The crazy thing about Georgia is, and I think you guys will get like this comparison since we're all pretty much from New England. Like the entire state is as big as the entirety of New England. So like picture like the distance of Connecticut to like Vermont, So it's kind of in the middle to the north, but it's only like 5 hours, 6 hours away. So it's not that bad of a trip. And that still only covers like half the area of the state. It's such a huge state. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I'm in southeastern Massachusetts, and I complain when I have to drive to Rhode Island sometimes. So I mean, I could never hack it in a big state. But the reason I ask is because it felt like you knew the city so well. So what made you say this has got to be the setting, and how did you go about planning to bring it to life?
Well, I knew from the start when I was sitting down to write this, I knew I wanted to do a ghost story, and I knew I wanted to do something set in a restaurant because it's just a world that I'm very familiar with, and I had stuff I wanted to say about it. But when I was thinking, like, where should I set it? I mean, instantly, I was just like Savannah because, the first time I went was when I moved to Georgia. So that was like 20 years ago. And, I was excited to go on a road trip. My friend told me about it, but I didn't really know much about Savannah except like some vague mention in Gone with the Wind, And then she told me to read Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And at first I was like, ew, I don't want to read nonfiction. That's so boring. But she's like, no, you really want to read this book. And it was such a gorgeous, twisted book. So I went like ready. Like I had already met all these other characters that were real life characters through that book, gotten prepared for settings and hauntings and weird Southern stuff. And it definitely did not disappoint. And we went on a ghost tour too. My first trip. I've actually managed to go on a ghost tour almost every trip I've made to Savannah because it is so freaking fun. Obviously as a horror fan, I love stuff like that anyway. But even if you're not a horror fan, you're walking through this gorgeous atmosphere. Like it's unlike any other place that you've ever been. The closest I can compare it with is kind of like when you're walking through Boston and you're walking through like the historic district or like the North End, and you really feel like a sense of history. And that's what Savannah is like. It's the only city in the South that's really like that because everything else got destroyed. So it's kind of like a time capsule of what the South was like before the Civil War. And as a history fan, it's super interesting. But I wanted to, in the best way I could, I wanted to showcase how much I love that city through this book too.
Can you talk about the synopsis real quick? Because I don't want either one of us to give away anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just for potential, readers, it'd probably be a good idea.
Okay, so Clementine, she's pretty young. She just graduated high school, and she's coming from a broken home, and she gets her first job at a restaurant. And so she gets there thinking this will be the key to my future, the key to a new life. And of course, it's not that easy. You know, restaurant work's very hard. And on top of all of that, she encounters a ghost on her first day, first shift. So she becomes friends with the ghost because it's a young girl like her. So, they kind of bond. And while they're bonding, the ghost sees that, sometimes people are picking on Clementine or sometimes she's got a rude customer. So the ghost decides to kind of pitch in and defend her by playing pranks on these people. And it's fun at first, it's lighthearted, but somehow the energies from their interactions call up another ghost to come into the game. And it's the ghost of the man who murdered Clementine's friend Rosemary. So when he comes, obviously everything intensifies, gets really crazy, and it becomes sort of a battle to see, how is she going to not only survive and save her friends who are also now being targeted, but, still make the life that she wants. So, yeah, I guess that's about as best that I can do without spoiling stuff. So,
Brennan?
Well, I was going to say, before we jumped into the synopsis, I actually had another question about Savannah. Now, you focused a lot on the ghost tour stuff, and I'm wondering, is that a reflection on you, or is it like a big, big part of the city's like culture?
it's a huge part of the city's culture. Like, okay, so 20 years ago, when I went on a ghost tour, now this was only a couple years after Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil had been written. And that was when Savannah experienced like this massive tourist boom because that book and the movie were so popular. So, one of the things that, of course, kept the tourists coming back, besides the sights and stuff in that story, is the fact that people are super into their local ghosts there. Especially as downtown Savannah was going through a massive reconstruction and renovation. So all these old houses are now coming with all these old legends of this or that person who died there, spirits that haunt the graveyards. Plus, if you walk through the streets, I think I mentioned it in part of the book, it's absolutely true. Like if you walk through certain parts of the streets downtown, you'll see like the pavement buckling and stuff. And I remember on the ghost tour I was on, I was like, God, they need to fix this. This looks terrible. And the ghost tour guide was like, well, they can't really fix it because those coffins coming out of the ground. And I'm like, oh my God. So people are like literally just driving over coffins that are popping out of the ground. And some of the most beautiful sites, like Forsyth Park or a couple of the squares, are actually mass graves from yellow fever victims, from people who died during the slave auctions. I mean, thousands of people just buried without individual markers. Who even knows if they did anything to consecrate the ground? I don't know. So yeah, the ghost stuff there, it is a huge business. And there might have been maybe half a dozen ghost tours operating when I went there 20 years ago. There's now dozens. I mean, from big to small, that's a lot of people. And even if they don't do that as a side business, you can go down there, sit in any bar, any cafe, you can just have a chat with a local and they will tell you everything. Like you don't even need to pay for a tour. They'll tell you everything. They'll take you wherever you want to go because they're super hospitable people. So yeah, it's a cool place.
So,
Does it get
no,
oh, sorry, Pat, go ahead.
I was going to say, with exceptions like Jennifer, no New Englanders allowed. A bunch of douchebags up there.
They do still call us Yankees. So
I don't know if you two
are.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't know if you two are fans of Dennis Leary, but he loves that word.
Which one?
Douchebag.
Oh, douchebag. I have not watched him for a long time, but I did used to like him.
His stand-up comedy is hilarious. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. Brennan, go ahead. Enough of my antics.
I was just wondering if the with the jump in the amount of tours, does it feel very authentic or does it feel touristy? You know, I think of I don't know, when you lived in New England, you must have visited Salem, right?
Oh yeah, I actually went
Yeah.
on Halloween, and
Yeah.
that was awesome. Yeah.
I went once on Halloween, and I don't think I'd ever do that again, you know, standing room only. But to me, Salem feels just so extremely touristy and, you know, inauthentic at times, depending on what you're there to do, I suppose. How would you compare that atmosphere to Savannah?
Um, I would say, well, when I went to Salem, now this was even further than 20 years ago. This was like the year I graduated, I think, or started college. So like 96, 97 was when I went. And, they had the cute little buildings set up and they had some people running around in costumes and they put on a few like stage performances in the street, which were pretty cool. So I like that. I did not get to see what it became now. I mean, I'm sure now it's crazy. In Savannah, it's similar. I mean, they do the tour guides, if they're good, they will put on a show. Like I saw one tour, and I kind of gave a nod to him in the book. Like it's sweltering hot, and this dude's walking around in like velvet and, and lace, just to look like some authentic like antebellum lordling or whatever, you know. But it's done in a way that I think for horror fans it wouldn't necessarily be off-putting because look at some of the movies and stuff that we like. Like we don't necessarily like a horror movie because it's Oscar worthy or whatever. Sometimes we enjoy the campiness and we enjoy a little tongue in cheek. So, you know, and I think they do it in a way that's entertaining versus eye rolling.
Absolutely. I'm gonna bring it back. I'm gonna reel it back to the book. But before I do that, I don't detect any kind of accent with you that is Southern, and I. It's interesting because some people will pick up on things like I've lived in Jersey only for 5 years. I've stopped saying things like "packy" and I stopped using lingo from up in Massachusetts because people don't know what the fuck I'm saying.
Okay, let me ask you this real quick, just a quick aside. What's a grinder?
A grinder, well, some think it's a sub, others call it, well, I say sub. So the grinder's a sub.
Right, it's a sub, right? I ask for that down. Well, I used to. I know better now. But I'd say like, "Oh God, I could kill for a grinder," and people look at me like, "What the fuck are you even talking about? What is that? That's not a thing." My boyfriend thought, and we've been together pretty much the whole time I've been here. But he's like, "You're just making up words. There's no way that that's a thing." But but no, my accent it hasn't really ever gone away. Like, and sometimes when I'm around people from this area, a little Southern does come out because I don't know. I think we all do that. Like we kind of start reflecting subconsciously the people that we're around. But yeah, my boyfriend, he gets so irritated when I'm on the phone with like my friends from back home or family because he's like, "Why is your voice so different? Why are you talking so fancy?" And I'm like, "Fancy? Well, like what are you even talking about? I'm not slurring my words together with like just all vowels or whatever like you people do." But then when I talk to my friends from back home, they're like, "You sound so Southern. Like, you don't even sound like yourself at all." So, I mean, I guess, I don't know. There's got to be something in there. It's just I've never let it get that bad, I guess.
That's hilarious. In the before times when I used to go back home in Massachusetts, I'd just hang out with all my friends, get together, and I'd close my eyes and just listen to them talk. I'm like, I fucking love this. So no one knows they're ours. We sound like idiots. I love it.
How
But
do you order a soda though?
me
Oh,
or her?
well,
I'm
I
just
don't
joking.
I don't drink soda, but I have learned one thing. When you're ordering a soda in Georgia, it's a Coke. It's always a Coke. It could be Mountain Dew, it could be Pepsi, it could be Sprite, but you're ordering a Coke.
So I'll have
So,
a Coke Mountain Dew, or
yeah.
I've heard that before, and it's so strange. There was a band called Showbread that was kind of I guess I'd put them in that kind of like punk hardcore category. They are originally from Savannah, and they used to, whenever they were going through Massachusetts, they knew my wife from when she lived in Oregon. they would always stay with us, and I always found that so strange. Like, can I get a Coke Pepsi? Um, it's I mean, I suppose if it's everyday life, fine, but like if you really break it down and analyze it, it makes my brain hurt.
Coke is so serious down here because, of course, their headquarters are in Atlanta, and they've got like this big building, a Coke museum, all sorts of stuff. I've waited on like executives that work at Coke, and they have to ask. I don't know if they still do, but they did back then. They have to ask when they're coming into your restaurant if you serve Coke products or not. If you don't, they have to go somewhere else. Because if word ever gets back to the Coke company that they're drinking anything else, even if they don't order a Coke, they could order a beer, they could order a water. But if it doesn't have it in the restaurant, they're not allowed to eat there.
I'm not surprised with that for one specific reason. I worked for Polar Beverages for 5 years, and I talked, as Brendan can contest, I make friends everywhere. So I talked to all the Coke reps, I talked to all the Pepsi and other vendor reps, and I heard that only Coke does that. Like they're the guys that sell for them. They said if we're going to a barbecue, again in the before times, if we're going to a family event and they're not having, we gotta ask if they're not having Coke, we can't go. I'm like, dude, you're off the clock. Fuck them.
Yeah. Well, because it's just one of those things. They could take the chance, but if word ever got back, I mean, that's it. They're screwed, you know?
They're a tight bunch.
Hmm.
I like some of their products, but nah, fuck them. They're never gonna sponsor us. They can go fuck themselves.
Unless they do want to sponsor us, in which case we welcome our soda overlords.
That's true. Coke, if you want to sponsor with Dead Headspace, we can say fuck Pepsi and not Polar. I love Polar, so that's not happening. But let's go back to Clementine's Awakening. Now, this is a weird way to jump into this. Not sure even Brendan's gonna know my way to go about this, but the connection with a book we just talked about last episode, Heart Strange and Dreadful by Tim McGregor, has a weird connection. I was reading them at the same time. They're both, and actually another book I'm reading right now for the Pikecast podcast called The Eternal Enemy. They all
I
involve.
love that one.
It's really good. I'm gonna finish it up either tonight or tomorrow morning, and they're all about, well, yours isn't a teenager, but she's close. They're all young women, either older adults or young women. Hester in Heart Strange and Dreadful is 16, so she's the youngest of those three. But the thing of all three of them, so we got Heart Strange and Dreadful based in the 1800s. Yours is based in now in modern time, and Christopher Pike's is the 90s, early 90s. They're all similar in the sense where they're always questioning themselves, always down, and always thinking they don't deserve things. And they're all different reasons. I mean, the one in the 1800s, women didn't have a voice, so I mean that makes sense. In your case, the mom. I hope this is. I don't think this spoils it really, but the mom was just not very nice to say the least.
Yeah.
And I just found that very interesting. I read multiple books at once. I don't know if the listeners do, but Brennan and I have to for the show. And I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was really cool, really unique, but at the same time, very sad because I feel like that is true and has been true for a lot of women. I'm not a woman, so I don't know, but do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, and I would say it's not even necessarily, relevant only to women. I think that any of us, depending on the environment that we're raised in, the building blocks and, the hand of cards or however you want to put it, depending on what we're given, that can really shape the people we become, how we view ourselves based on how we perceive other people to view us. And that's why it's so important. I mean, not to have a perfect home. No one's ever going to have a perfect home, but to have, if you're a parent, to make the best home possible for your kid, because stuff's going to happen and no one's perfect. And maybe your kid will do stuff, that is stupid, but you still want to do your best by them because, I mean, you could really mess them up for a long time. You know, I'm really fortunate that I've got a great family, but we didn't have it always easy, and there was a lot of stuff that happened when I was growing up that, messed with my head. But, I tried to push through. And if, there's times where you doubt what you can do. And especially as a woman, sometimes that is an extra burden, but you've got to, at one time you've got to realize, okay, this bad stuff happened, but I have goals and I want to do stuff, so I'm gonna have to try to figure out some way to do it. And if it means cutting off everything else, then maybe I need to do that for a time. And I think that's what Clementine does too. I mean, she realizes that she has to get away from, the home she came from, but it's not just so easy to leave. I mean, all that still follows you to some extent. So you have to get out of the environment, but you've also got to work on yourself too to try to erase some of the harm that's been done and move forward as best you can.
It's a comment she makes in the book where, again, this doesn't spoil it, but she mentions how in stories you rarely see the aftermath of a female facing off an antagonist, and I'll leave it there because I don't want to say too much. Brendan, you got any comments on the previous topic?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that really hit me hard about reading this, I have someone very close to me, who Clementine's mom, that was their mom, um, almost down to a T, even down to the fact where the grandmother kind of held things together, but by a very loose thread. Um, her grandma was even a heavy smoker. Like it almost just it seemed like I was reading about that person. And I wondered, and certainly you don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but I wondered if you drew on some kind of experience, whether personal or anecdotal, to create that relationship.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I am happy to say that the problems that did happen in my youth, my family and I have moved past them. But for a time, yeah, it was absolutely dark and horrific. Addiction is a terrible thing. And it's probably one of the worst things that can happen to a family because the wounds that it makes, they last a lifetime. It's terrible. So I definitely drew from experience, but I think a lot of authors do that too, with their best characters. It's not that you're writing purely about yourself, because Clementine is a different person than me. But there's always a little grain here and there of truth, the whole write what you know thing. There's always a teeny little bit of you here and there sprinkled throughout a manuscript. And but yeah, that was definitely something that I can relate to, is having a fear going home, like what am I going to find when I go home this time, what's waiting for me. And sometimes there are people in your life, like I had wonderful grandmothers, and they were often there if I needed to talk or vent or whatever. But at the same time, and maybe it was their generation, because I don't know that it would happen today necessarily, but they only interfere so far in the lives of their children, even for their grandchildren, because at least where I grew up, people mind their own business. Like that's a thing, not it's not like the South where everyone, you can meet someone and in 5 minutes their entire life story, all good and bad, but back up north in New England, you don't really know a lot about people, and they don't really share. We're not a sharing type of bunch, even with our family, so there's definitely a line. People don't interfere that much in each other's lives. They're there to support you. They're there to they're good allies to have, but they're only going to go so far. So in a way that's good though, because if you can work it right, that's another way that you can learn to take care of yourself because you have to. No one else is going to do it.
I got a question about that, geographic wise. I've heard from a friend that's from California originally that New England, specifically, it's cold all the time up there in the winter, and it seems like it's cold there all the time year round. It's not, but it seems like it. And we're colder, not my words, theirs, but I agree with it. We're a colder group of people than Californians. And I'm real curious if it has to do with the climate that we live in, because it's when it's cold, it's fucking brutal. Like the thing in Texas that's happening right now. I
Mhm.
mean, I haven't gone through, not my government not being prepared, because we deal with it every year, but
Mhm.
there's been a there not, and maybe not even every winter, but there's been a lot of winters where we have gone without power for days. And
Yep.
I just remember the only place being open is Cumberland Farms, where
Yeah.
that
Cumbies.
or Dunkin' Donuts, and the only thing is like we're just skidding around, smoking a little, doing the only thing that like is fun, because going home is fucking cold, and the only thing that you can keep for heat on is the fireplace, and I can't watch anything. I wasn't even reading books all that much when I was still living there, and I don't know. Do you guys think that's like due to the climate that it kind of makes people a little bit more cold? Because even in my families, like some of my cousins, one in particular, like I'm tall, I'm 6'3", 6'4", depending on what doctor you ask, I guess. But one of my cousins is 6'7", very quiet guy, and my mom would always comment how I'm the only one that he seems to talk to, because, like I said, I can talk to anyone. But I, I think it kind of goes along with what you were saying, that we aren't like the southern type, and I mean I don't know how else to explain it. Do you guys think it's partially due to weather?
We don't talk because we're miserable because the weather sucks 11 months a year, is what you're saying.
I mean, there could be a correlation, for sure. Um, we're a pretty wild bunch, my family, when the family is together. Like our parties are legendary to the point where word would get around. And when I was going to school at the same place that my dad and my uncles went to school, they'd be like, "Oh God, another Soucy? Oh shit!" you know. but um, but no, like I think like I describe it not necessarily as cold. I think we're just more reserved. And we're only reserved when we don't know who we're dealing with. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like we wave when we see people that we know driving by or whatever. We're not assholes, but no, we don't walk up to people. Well,
I mean, in the Cape, yeah, you wave to everyone, but I mean, you go to Brockton. I mean, I don't want
well,
to
yeah,
even open
maybe
my
not
fucking
Brockton.
window.
But like, I mean, I lived for a time in a town, Stafford, that was so small that it's one of those places where you could say everyone knows everyone and you're not far off, but like people would drive by and you'd know them. So you'd wave and whatever. You might talk behind their back, but only to yourself. Like down in the South, like gossip and backstabbing is an art form. It's like a French court or something. Where they will literally be talking about you, talking all sorts of shit the minute you walk up. They're like, "Oh, hey, girl, what's up?" you know. But yeah, I think it's just we're reserved. We keep our problems to ourselves. Like there's all sorts of adages. I don't know if y'all's grandparents or parents used to say stuff, but like we don't air our laundry out in public and whatever, like weird stuff like that. Like we just don't. We're screwed up as hell, but we would never let anyone see it. So
Brennan?
I'll tell you, it warms my cold New England heart that when you said, "Yeah, Cumbies,"
yeah.
and like 90% of our listenership has no idea what we mean by right now, but
Sounds sexual.
It yeah, it does. Well,
Going back, going
in
back.
Stafford, it probably is. Sorry, all my former neighbors. But no, like we had a Cumberland Farms, and we had I forget what the other gas station was, but they were right across the street
It
in
doesn't
the
even matter.
I know, in the downtown area. So like that was where the library and like City Hall, and it was literally like one little rotunda, and that's it with some old buildings. But we had no place to hang out as kids.
Hmm.
So if you lived close to town, you would hang out in the parking lot of one of those two gas stations. That was it. That was what we had.
So I don't know if Brennan was going to bring this up, but I'm going to bring this back again to Clementine's Awakening. He made a funny comparison, at least funny to me, to Henry. Brennan, can you? Can you please tell her about that?
Whenever I was reading it, I always pictured the cartoon Johnny Bravo because he's so big and he's so broad, um, in the way you describe him. And as a piano player myself, I kind of appreciated. I pictured myself in that role, but no, I did that's what came to mind with Henry. Um, no, actually, I did want to talk about as far as bringing the piano in to enhance the atmosphere of the restaurant. I wanted to talk about the restaurant. Now, you mentioned that you worked in food service, and you didn't even have to mention that because anybody who has ever worked in food service could read that opening chapter and know full well that there's no way you're writing that without that experience. Was it important to you to kind of get that authentic? Because I mean, there's a lot of details in it. I know if I was writing that, I would almost worry, am I putting too much into it and distracting from the character or the plot? But it worked perfectly. Um, was it important to you to capture that?
It absolutely was. I think one of the times I first started thinking I need to write about a restaurant was before I even decided to start writing again. And, it was just after a shitty shift. And I was like, just taking a break, taking a breather. And I was like, I really don't know how many people understand what working in a place like this entails. What you put yourself through, not just physically, but emotionally. It doesn't even mean that you necessarily care about your job, but you're opening yourself up to so much to make money. And sometimes it's great and you get, you meet awesome people. And sometimes you meet the most horrible people who it's not just enough for them to be like, the food sucked or whatever. They've got to go and take it to such an extreme. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, what is wrong with you that you would do this? Because I'm sure you've seen like YouTube videos of people getting into like fist fights because someone left the onions on their sandwich or something. I mean, stupid stuff. So I thought to myself, someone really needs to write a story about what servers and cooks and bartenders, what we all go through, because there's people out there who obviously have never worked in any sort of customer service, and maybe if they had some education they'd realize that they need to tone it down a little bit. So instead of waiting on someone to write something like that, I guess I just wrote something like that. So it definitely was important for me to capture the details because I really wanted to do justice to everyone I know. I mean, all of my friends, especially, but anyone who's worked in this industry, we are all like brothers and sisters at arms. It is a brotherhood. It is, I mean, that's why like there's sites on Facebook, Instagram, like the Angry Bartender and Server Nightmares. You can look at those any time of the day and you're like, yes, whoever you are that posted this, I feel you. I've been there. So I mean, it's a group that is so huge. So many millions of people have done this job, but I just wanted to show that I've done it and I appreciate everything that we've all suffered and I respect all of them. So
So it's a little bit of an attitude of, we're gonna get to the ghosts, but y'all are gonna learn a little bit first.
Yes.
And like you kind of said, there's two types of people in a restaurant: those who have done the job and those who haven't. And I worked in a restaurant from probably about 14 until late teens, early 20s, and um, the any scene that you write where a customer puts their hands on a waitress, it almost might seem like it's in there for dramatic purposes. And just the number of waitresses I worked
Yeah.
with, it's not. It's
Hmm.
and a lot of times you'll watch those poor girls suck it up because they want to keep
Hmm.
their job because it's not worth it. Or I mean, is that something you went through a lot? You're nodding your head as soon as I threw
Yes.
it out there.
Yes. I mean, in the good and the bad sense, working in a restaurant is a hotbed of sexual and physical, every type of harassment possible. And I say in a good sense because obviously not that any of that is good when it's done against anyone's wishes. But we're all a bunch of children, all of us restaurant workers. So like there's definitely among your friends, the banter is like very childish humor. It's like potty humor and talking sex a lot and whatever. But it's different when obviously it's different when you're among your friends. No one's doing this to belittle or hurt or antagonize anyone. But yeah, as far as like the bad side of it, happens all the time. And I would like to say, especially to women, but I've seen it happen to some guys I've worked with too. I worked one time when I was a manager, which was the worst job decision I ever made. But when I was a manager, I had a really young, good looking guy who was one of my bartenders, sweetest kid ever, like wonderful guy. And he had like some creepy old lady regulars who would come in, and the things they said to him would, it would make your hair fall out. Shocking that like these old grandmothers, some of them were school teachers in the school district, talking about how they'd like to take him out for a drink and that they could teach him a thing or two or whatever. And I was like, okay, they're cut off. And he's like, what you mean? What you want me to tell them they can't have any more alcohol? I'm like, yeah, because I want them to get the fuck out. They can't talk to you like that. And he's like, well, thanks, Jen. No one's ever done anything like that. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I do something like that? Just because you're not a girl, you're a person too.
Yeah,
Unless you're hiding something and you want one of them to ask you out. Of
could
course,
be.
right? Of course. But yeah, I've been grabbed, I've been pinched, I've been called, all sorts of names. I've had to have a manager walk me out to the car before because there were guys that acted like they were going to come back, in case I wanted to go on that special date after work. And it's like, no, of course I don't, And at one time I had a bartender had to hop over the counter because a drunk guy grabbed me and yanked me from swiping his card.
Oh,
And the bartender had to grab him and throw him and he did. He physically threw him out of the bar. But I still swiped his card, so it was good.
I hope you got a big
There's
tip
that
for that.
training.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll make this short and sweet. We me and my wife went to a restaurant that we went to last year for Valentine's Day. Great experience last year. This time, not so much. Wasn't the waitress. Was the kitchen. Was the manager that for some reason on the one of the busiest nights was in the back, staying in the back, never once checking any fucking table. So the waitress was a young girl, and at one point we're just asking, like, hey, um, just curious when the food's coming, and then I saw she was getting really sad. She cried. I was with my son, and I said, please hold my baby and hug him. And I'm like, look, we're not mad at you. I have a very good understanding of waitresses because of my wife. She went through that stuff during college, and she told me a lot of stories. Thank God no one touched her that I know of, or I knocked their socks off. But um, this girl was crying for a little bit. I'm like, look, seriously, we're upset with the kitchen, not you. You're doing great. And the whole time we were there, we are just making sure she was okay. And it just pisses me off when, the manager's in the back and this girl's crying. You can't even come out. Like, it pisses me off how waitresses are treated.
It really does suck. And sometimes it happens too, like that, which I try. There's not always a rivalry between like the back of the house and front of the house. Sometimes there is though, and I tried to show that a little bit. But
Fuck
waitresses,
Edwin.
I know, he's such an asshole. But no, sometimes they do get mad because when it comes right down to it, the servers make and the bartenders make the most money by far in the restaurant. Because if they're doing a good job, their tips, the sky's the limit. So the kitchen though, they work just as hard. They get really sweaty, really dirty, no breaks, just like servers. But they get like 10, 11, 12 bucks an hour in Georgia anyway. And so it's really hard work for very little pay. And I just kind of wanted to showcase that a little bit too. But some managers are better than others. Some companies are better than others. And yes, there's laws on the books. You're not supposed to harass people. You're not supposed to do this or that to them. But I can't tell you how many times I've had to quit a job. Well, not had to. I wanted to quit a job, and I did because I saw stuff that was just wrong. Because it really does come down to, depending on the corporation, how big they are, how much they don't want to get a spotlight put on them, they'll tell you, okay, but are you like dead? Like, just suck it up.
Right.
So what if did he really hurt you, or did he just like touch your arm? They make you think like you're the crazy one because they don't want to lose a customer. So it really does come down to you just smile and take it if you want to keep your job.
That's
Because
good. Yeah.
they're not going to fire you like and say that's why they fired you, but they'll find a way. They cut your hours, they
Yep.
drop you off the schedule. They always find a way.
I agree. I got one funny story that my wife told me. Well, it's funny now and it's funny that she didn't get hurt. It's not funny if it could have gone another way, but there was this one guy she worked at IHOP in right next to the Rhode Island Mall, the Province Place Mall, whatever. And there's this guy that had a sword, just had a fucking sword attached to his waistband.
You're right, hilarious.
Yeah.
It's not fun. It's funny now, thinking about it in a comical sense, but no, it's not funny. Like if I was there, I would have. I'm Irish, dude. I would have got. I don't fight people, but when it comes to my wife, yeah, I would have gotten in that guy's face or something. But he wouldn't put it away, and my wife had to get a manager. It's like, bro, you got a fucking weapon.
Right. And again, he could be totally harmless. He could be that person that loses his mind because they put mayonnaise instead of ranch on his chicken or something. And people do. They lose their minds over the stupidest, most nonsensical shit in a restaurant. Stuff that's so easy to fix. It's like, just take a break, breathe, we'll fix it. It's only food.
And again, it wasn't a pocket knife. He had a holster. It's a sword.
Was he like a knight type of sword wielder, or was it like scary ninja?
Sounded like an old random white guy that had some problems, perhaps flashbacks from a different lifetime.
Gotcha.
So, Brennan, let's go back again to Clementine's Awakening. Do you have?
I want to say something about that real quick, because this is now the fourth time, at least, that you've said let's actually talk about the book. But I want to defend myself here real quick. The first time I said tell me about Savannah, then we said tell me about the relationship between Clem and her mom, tell me about the food service industry, and to me, what really worked for this book is just how, I can't think of a better word than authentic it feels. And it feels the world the story takes place in, the characters in that world just feel very authentic. The world feels very lived in. And to me, like that's the success of this book. That's why people should be ordering it right now. So Patrick, go ahead, go to the book.
Thank you so much.
Where do I start? Because it goes from, all right, whoever potential readers, especially if you're watching this, don't trust her sweet appearance, because she can write very graphic and very intense horror. I thought it was fantastic. It really wasn't. I texted Ken McKinley and Brennan right after I finished it. It's just really well done. I thought it was very authentic, like Brendan said. One thing that stuck out to me that was kind of neat was a bench of Forrest Gump. It's just a small detail, but you mix. Yeah. I'm a history nerd. I also love horror. Can't say which I love more when it comes down to it, because they're just I love both of them. But you talk about those two so often that it's like a nice blanket of history and horror interwoven with each other. And you just get warm and cuddly in it, and then you die a terrible death because you love it. And we love it. Which, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, Brendan's got it in the background on the bookshelf right now behind his silver shamrock mug.
I see her. Hey, Clementine.
Can we talk about that cover real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Did you suggest what it should be about, or how did that come about?
No, and I typically don't. Like, I've self-published 2 other novels, and I might throw out like, this is sort of what I saw or whatever, but I really let the cover artists do their thing, because I've been very fortunate enough that the cover artists I've worked with have been excellent. So like, I have every trust that whatever their brain is going to come up with is going to be way better than anything my brain could come up with. So, but yeah, Keelan Patrick Burke, of course, is a master. He's a genius, and he's the one. I don't know what all Ken told him. I just gave them like a vague description of the characters as I saw them, and they just went from there. And when I saw it, I was like totally in love. Like I never even imagined that's what the cover could look like, but it's absolutely perfect. It fits it so well.
So that does look like in your head, Rosemary, the captain, and
Clementine.
I don't know why I'm looking at the fucking title and I can't think of her name for a second. Sorry, but I blame working and then coming on the show. My apologies. Is that what they look like to you?
In my mind, yeah. Is that what they look like in you guys' mind?
That's
No,
a hard question because I saw the cover before I read the story. So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't think Clementine did, but it's so. I mean, it really is whatever it is. But Rosemary, yeah, and the scruffiness of the captain, yeah. I don't know.
I imagine I imagine like a scruffy Captain Hook. Like not quite as fancy as and dapper, because obviously he's lived a little bit harder of a life, but but yeah, that's definitely like how I thought of him.
Now, I don't know. I'm gonna stop after this because I don't want to spoil anything. But I like how the story progresses. I like the arc of Clementine. The ending is horror in a nutshell. Beyond that, I think it's worth anyone's time to check it out. And won't it still be Women in Horror Month?
Yeah, through the end of the month.
Well, okay, yeah, Thursday. It's the last Thursday of February, right? So you'll have.
Is it already the 28th on Thursday?
So it'll be the 25th when this episode airs.
mhm.
Um, Yeah, so we'll have 3 days for Women in Horror Month, but you can buy it any
Yeah.
other time. And if you
Yeah, I
hear
was
this
gonna
years
say.
later, and if you
Mhm.
hear this, well, I kind of use that as a prompt to, hey, guess what? You only got 3 days. But then I was gonna follow that up with, if you hear this years later, you can still buy it.
Mhm.
You
Very
are
true.
allowed to buy women in March.
Yeah,
It's very true.
we encourage everyone to buy women all year round.
It's iffy, but we'll allow it.
Yeah. Well, I think March is actually like, isn't it like National Women Month or something like that? I
Is
thought
it?
I saw that somewhere. I mean, there's something for everything nowadays, which is cool, but at the same time, it can be very hard to follow. Different days where like it's National Hot Dog Day or National Margarita Day. It's like, who decided this? When did this happen? And then you don't know about it until it's already over.
I still have guilt though, even though when I get at 9 o'clock, oh my god, I didn't even eat a hot dog today. What the hell am I
Brendan,
doing?
Brendan, we talked about this with Tim McGregor in the last episode. It's because you're Catholic.
It's true.
The guilt
The
thing.
guilt. The
Are you?
guilt.
What's it like down in Georgia? Because I've only driven through there to get to Florida. It like religion wise, is it big on Catholicism or
Oh, not at all. No,
smart?
not at all. Well, I mean, I am no longer a practicing Catholic. I don't
Yeah,
even know what I am. I'm question mark leaning towards paganism. But I was raised a proper Catholic, and I quit when I was 13. Somehow, I don't even know how, because the guilt that my mother threw on me should have been the end of me right then and there, but I made it through. But no, I came down here, and church is it is like the social event in the South. So it's a common question when you meet people is they'll be like, where do you go to church? Where are your people? Where do you pray at? And I'm like, well, I don't anymore, but I was raised a Catholic. They look like some freaking soot-covered witch that just hopped off her pyre and is like, hey y'all, because they equate, Catholicism, not equate it, but they definitely see it as something more mystical, something that's not quite right, something very different than Protestant. And mostly down here, it's mostly Baptist, but there's also like lots of other little smaller groups. There's snake charmers and people who like they have a church in the town next to us. They walk up and down the aisle with snakes and like kiss them and stuff. And sometimes they get bit and sometimes they run the risk of getting poisoned. So because they don't always use snakes that aren't venomous.
I think it's very telling that you have snake handlers right near you, and it's the Catholics that get ostracized.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't even make sense. But no,
Doesn't it though?
right, it kind of, but I'm a very big believer, as long as you're a nice person, I don't care what you do.
Same.
You can worship whatever you want, just don't come and try to force it on me. There's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses down here.
Jesus
One time,
Christ. I'm
I
just
know.
joking.
No, but and it's fine. But one time scared the shit out of me. I was going for an early shift at a restaurant I was working at. So it was like not even 4 o'clock in the morning because I had to be there at 4. So I had stopped at the gas station for a coffee and I was sitting in the car trying to like sip a little bit, get my head in the right place. All of a sudden, fist pounding my window. I screamed, like coffee splashing everywhere. And I look over and it's this guy in a suit and he's smiling, like creepy as hell. And then he picks up a watchtower and he like puts it to my windshield. I'm like, get the fuck out of my face. What's wrong with you? Like, I thought you were a murderer.
That's a horror movie. I've had
I
some of
know.
those.
I don't want your pamphlet.
Yeah, I've had two of them at my door in South Jersey, and they were just talking. They're like, ask me if I believe in this. Do I believe God's the holy, watcher, whatever the hell they said. I'm like, I don't. Have a nice day. Like, I'm not gonna tell you what I believe in. Like, come on.
My mom got so mad at me once. The Mormons had just started coming into one of our towns in Connecticut. And again, very nice people, but I was just not in the mood and I was a rebellious teenager and a bit of a jerk, so whatever. But they came knocking on the door and I answered it and they were like, "Do you want to talk about Jesus?" And I said, "No, we worship the dark one here." And I just shut the door in their faces. And my mom was like, "Great, now you're telling people we're Satanists. Now who's going to come knocking on the door?"
If you're asked that question by a stranger, which I have been, and in my wife's presence too, if we go to church, even in Jersey, it's not south enough. It's weird. It's a weird question,
Hmm.
especially if you just met that day.
Well,
Like,
because it's a very personal topic.
it's a loaded question. People, I don't think of that because you know what? Me and Michael David Wilson privately had a conversation about this. About I forget how it even started about religion, and it that you're essentially asking me what are my core beliefs and what do I believe in everything or nothing, depending on what you believe in.
It's a little too
Right.
much to be sold door to door like it's a vacuum cleaner in the 1960s.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, and it's just, and there's a time and a place for it too. Like, I feel like, and I don't know, maybe it was just this is like 5-10 minutes ago, but I was just in Texas right before the snow hit. I was visiting my sister who lives out there. So I made it home in time and I avoided the worst of it. But like when I land in Atlanta, someone just comes up. I don't know what religion they were. They had books or whatever, and they were walking up, and I already knew what was going to happen. Like, because he was lifting one of the books, he was coming up to me. There was a group of guys next to me. He totally ignored them, and he comes to me, and I'm like, "No, thank you. Just I'm good, thank you." And in my head, I'm like, I should have been more of a jerk because it's like you walked past this group of guys, but you see the one woman on her own, and you're like, "Ah, I could talk to her. She's not scary. She's got no one there with her." It's just annoying. It's like in the time and place, you don't go and attack people out in the wider world, unless you've got an invitation. If you do, then by all means, talk
Right.
happily about whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Take my advice for when you're in New York. I've been twice, once in the eighth grade, second with my wife, and she said, Pat, this isn't Boston. Don't talk to people. They aren't friendly here. I'm like, come
They're
on.
not. They're not.
No, the only friendly person I met there was another lady that was wearing a Boston hat. And so we're in like downtown Manhattan, and I was having some serious anxiety attacks because look, I don't like crowds. I like going to concerts, but that's because the music's there to distract me. I don't like Manhattan crowds. That is just too much, too many people in one space. All the buildings are so big. Like it took a few hours for me to get used to it, but we were coming out of one of the museums one day, and like this monk, I don't know, I can presume what religion he was, but I'm not certain. And he started talking to us. And before we even walked into the public sidewalk, my wife said, "Again, don't talk to anyone." And he came up to me, grabbed my wrist, gave me a bracelet, tried to sell me a book too, and I'm like yanking it off. I'm like, "Nope," and walked away. She's like, "What did I just tell you?" I'm like, "He talked to me first." But they were trying to sell me shit, you know?
Well, it's not just a bracelet for free. That's like the gateway gift. Like, we're going to give you this handsome bracelet, but you're going to have to listen to us for at least an hour. Just talk about what we believe.
They walked by my wife to get to me because I look like a child with a beard, and she looks like she's very not interested in their bracelets.
Yeah, New York is crazy. I've only been there a few times myself, even though I grew up like less than 2 hours away from there. But it's the same thing. You know, my parents didn't want to take us there. If we went on a big city adventure, it was usually to Boston because that was a place that was, I mean, more welcoming. And there was still like tons of cool stuff to do there. It's got the best aquarium I've ever been to in my whole
Oh,
life,
Boston
for
Aquarium's
one.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the food, you can't beat it. Like, we go to the North End and get pizza, and you got like a slice like this big that some grandmother's making behind the counter. And I swear we paid 50 cents for just a slice. And it came fresh out of the oven. And it's grandma's recipe. Like, that's the best.
The North End
Uh,
has like the best fucking Italian food.
they do. And they have awesome sweet shops too. So it's not even just the savory food. You can get like really good. They had big peanut butter cups, and that was my favorite
Ooh.
candy. Yeah. But no, Atlanta's different. And I mentioned that in the book too. You know, that you think you're in the South, you think it's all homogenous, but it's not. I mean, like any place, right? Any place. I mean, you can talk about the North, and the North is a really big area. So people from, not that New York is New England, which a lot of people confuse anyway, but New York is very different from New Jersey, which is very different from Connecticut, which is very different from Massachusetts and Maine. You know,
And
Georgia is very different
North
than
Jersey is very different from South Jersey.
exactly. So you don't have just one type of Southerner. But and that was the thing too that I really loved about going to Savannah, because when I first moved down here, I was like, this is not at all what I imagined. Like, Atlanta has skyscrapers, not skyscrapers, but really big tall buildings, and it's very city-like. And there's a lot of people like me who don't have accents. And I'm like, this is not the South. This is not what I imagined coming down here. You go to Savannah though, totally different. It's everything you thought it was going to be and more. But and then you go to other southern cities, they all have their own flavor. They've all got their own culture, traditions, and it's just fantastic. I definitely encourage. There's so much traveling to be done around the world, but definitely travel around the country too. There's a lot of cool things to see.
Yeah. Hey, so I should have asked this way earlier, but did you say you're from Stanford?
Stafford.
Oh, Stafford. Okay.
It's the
Because
home of the world famous Stafford Motor Speedway.
obviously should have known that.
it's
'Cause
like it's like as big as, like, I don't know, a child's park or something.
Because I've been to Stanford, I was to see Steve Wilkos live, and I don't know. It's a nice, quaint town.
Well, and I do have it in another one of my books. I do mention Stanford and Greenwich. It's sort of a class warfare book with witches versus Satanists called The Night She Fell. So definitely check that one out too if you want to see some Stanford mentions.
Nice.
That was a beautiful segue.
Thank you.
We're always looking for good segues on this show. We don't have them.
That son of a bitch Wilkos said, like, years before I even shaved my head, he goes, in 5 years, you'll look like me. In case you don't know what he looks like, he's bald. And I shaved my head, like, I don't know, and started in 2013, 2013. So that was like, I don't know, a year after I saw him live. So I blame him. Let's talk more about, Jennifer, your books.
Mhm.
Now, before we go into any of those,
Actually, I want to hear more about your experiences with Steve Wilkos.
I mean, that was it, man. I mean, the studio was fun. There was
Cool
no
story.
there was no censoring the curse words, and it's pretty weird watching trashy people and Steve Wilkos, who's a huge guy, interact so close.
I didn't think you were actually going to talk more about Steve Wilkos.
I'm
So,
like,
Jennifer, for the most part, you've before Clementine's Awakening, it's been all self-publishing. Is that right?
Yes, it wasn't supposed to necessarily be like that because I when I started joining the writing community, I had already written a couple books, and so I was kind of looking around to see like, well, what do I do? And obviously, you see a lot of information with various hashtags about traditional publishing, and I'm like, well, I guess I should try to go for that. And I saw a bunch of self-publishing stuff, and I made friends with several self-published authors. But when they started telling me the stuff they had to do, I was like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. That's a lot of work. I don't want to do that. I don't even know where to begin. So I did the Twitter pitch contests. I did a few of those. And so I sold my first book, which is actually the third book I wrote, and everything seemed to be going good, and it was going to be published, but it was a very small press. I was a new author, and I was going to be their first novel.
Oh.
So, but before, like, it was like a couple months before we were going to release, they had financial issues. Unfortunately, they had to close, but the book was ready. Like, it had this gorgeous cover. It was edited. So I was just like, well, I guess I'm going to try self-publishing now. Because it didn't make sense to me, querying, you guys know, because you're writers too. It takes forever. And I was so eager. Like, I'd already been marketing. I'd already been telling people my book's coming out. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to wing it. How hard can it be? Yeah, so she said later, it was super hard, and I'm still learning, even though that was almost a year ago. There's still so much to teach yourself if you're going to do it successfully. So I definitely encourage people, other writers out there, don't limit your options, because self-publishing is definitely a valid way to get your book out there, but just make sure you look into it. Don't just think, oh, it's just as simple as hitting publish on KDP. There's a lot more that goes into it. So just cover your bases.
See the conversation come up. It's cyclical conversation where, some idiot says something about self-published books are basically they're not real books. And I think the reason why is because there's quite a few that they don't put any work into it. They don't edit it. I've seen quite a few authors that say they don't need editors. It's like, what are you talking about?
I've seen that.
Even Stephen King needs one. And
well, he needs one, but does he always use one?
I don't know.
The question. No, because I think there's times where he's just like, whatever, I got it. Just proofread it.
Look, if we get him on the show, I'll say Jennifer Soucy has a question for you.
I am a lifelong constant reader. I've got questions.
Sounds like you have accusations.
I have those too. I love him so much. But when you've known someone as long as I've known Stephen King, which is like going on 30 plus years now, I've got a mixed bag of stuff I want to share. Like, why did you end the Dark Tower that way? My whole life. Everyone bitches about Game of Thrones, which I do too, because I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and they give George Martin a lot of hell.
Wait, which one? The novels? Wait, they aren't out
yet. The
novels.
Right. They're never going to be out, probably. But, I hear a lot of people complaining and crying like, oh, my life will never be complete. It's like, you know what? You didn't live waiting, hoping, fearing, and then finally giving up on the Dark Tower until it finally got completed. And then when you read that ending and you're like, he wrote himself into the book and then this happened too. Like, come on, man.
Brendan has opinions on that, I'm sure.
I like the ending. I've got problems with the final 3 books in the series, but like the afterward to the epilogue to the one more last thing, guys, I like that part.
I am right with you on that, and I think that was a good way to do it. But it's the other stuff that got thrown in, and it's like, why did you do that to all of us? Why did you do that to yourself?
I only read the first 4, so I think I'll stop there.
You should just stop there. Just make your own ending in your imagination.
Well, I can't see how any book is better than number 2, and then number 3 is pretty sweet too.
Oh yeah, the Drawing of the Three is definitely, I mean, to this day, it's one of my favorite
That's
books.
such
Amazing.
a good book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, let's reel back to Jennifer.
Okay, so I've got a stupid question, prefaced by a huge congratulations because you've got news today.
I
Um,
did.
why don't you announce it?
So as of today, I signed a contract with Silver Shamrock that I will have 6 books due out in the next 3 years. So 2 books a year. And it'll be a mix of novels and novellas, which I have not written a novella yet, but I'm super excited to. So, but yeah, I loved working with Silver Shamrock, and this is just really a dream come true to be able to be tied to them for another 3 years and to get my next books out through them because they are, I mean, if you can choose your publishers and you're a horror author, they should be at the top of your list of people to reach out to. So,
Oh, yeah. I mean, they are someone who I want to end up working with too. I didn't start by being friends with Ken. I started by being a fan of him as a businessman. Just kind of, well, you got that with like Sam Koyesnik too, or Flame Tree Press. Those are
mhm,
my 3 favorite.
those are
Um,
all good.
yeah, and they do a good product. They're consistent. They're very communicative. I can't say words. They speak well to people. It's just all around good stuff. But for Ken, you know what really drew me to him was when Todd Keisland was talking about him on Ink Heist, saying how a lot of smaller presses fail because of their business. They aren't business people and they don't focus on that. And Ken does. And that made me think, hey, that's someone I want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I mean, on top of that too, because we had a really fun podcast talk too, just me and him.
I edited
And
that.
you did. That's
That
awesome. Yeah, it was so much fun because obviously he's a good business person because Silver Shamrock's doing really well and they're attracting really good authors. But he's also a writer and he's also a huge horror fan. So when you're working with someone who's into all the same things you are, you have a lot of common ground and it makes it so easy. Like you can ask them questions that maybe if you were with a publisher that did a whole bunch of stuff, and maybe I don't know, say science fiction or whatever was your editor in chief's big thing. I don't know, you couldn't necessarily talk to them about your characters or plot line, or you could, but maybe you would feel like a dork, like, oh my God, I'm talking about like this or that. Are they going to get me? They're going to get you at Silver Shamrock because we're all on the same page. We all have the same passions and the same first loves and come from the same fandom background. We get all the same references and everything.
yeah, and Kenneth W. Kane too, the editor.
Oh, he's
He's
fantastic. Yeah.
a great guy, great editor, good writer. What was I going to say though? Also, oh yeah, about Ken. We saw the list, the tentative list for. I'm not going to go through it now, but we saw the tentative list for Unburying the Dead, and I got to tell you, me and Brennan didn't know more than half of the authors or titles, and that's why I believe I could speak for him. That's why we were so intrigued to do a podcast with him, because we're learning as we go along. Like he introduced us to Ronald Kelly. Uh, for audio listeners, I'm holding up a first edition Fair by Ronald Kelly. And I feel like it's weird. I feel kind of like a dummy that I should have known him, but at the same time, I'm like, how are you going to know something if you don't know it?
Hmm.
Um, and Ron's now a friend of the show, and he's still knocking it out 30 years later, give or take. So
Hmm.
he's shown us his collection of paperbacks in his house. It's unreal. I mean, this guy's got like 2,000 plus paperbacks. They're all horror, and
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
I hope there's more publishers like him down the line.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think the best ones, at least, we're very fortunate. Indie horror has some of the best publishers I've ever seen. Even if I've not worked with everyone, you follow them on Twitter, you talk to like some of the people they publish. And it just seems like there's a lot of really good relationships, which makes for a lot of really fine work. I kick myself that I did not get onto Twitter and stuff sooner because I mean, I've been a horror fan my whole life, but until maybe a few years ago when I got my Kindle, and even then, it was only like dabs here and there. I didn't really realize that there was an indie horror community,
Mm.
you know? And I'm so grateful that I found it because honestly, I feel like it's the best horror experiences I've had since I was a kid. Like you read a lot of the big five books, with the bigger names. Some of them are really good, totally deserve to be, listed in that top tier. But some of them, it's like you read it and you feel like it's just, formulaic or it's not as real or exciting. You read indie horror and it is just so much of it is so authentic, so gritty, so real. You get sucked right in and you're like, how the hell does nobody else seem to know who this person is? They're amazing. So I'm really glad that I did find it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then one more thing.
Indie horror. Sorry, Pat, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one more book that I can't shut the hell up about is Devil's Creek by Todd Keisland. That
It's
thing,
such a good book.
I mean, I've said it to Todd, I'm not trying to kiss his butt, but like that's a book that I could see being something that's relished for decades, or
Mhm.
I can see it last beyond his lifetime. And as many books as all three of us and the listeners love, let's be realistic. It's not probable that most of us are going to be known by the general public when we're
Mhm.
gone. We aren't. I think Todd's book, Devil's Creek, will be. If any of his books are, it'll probably be that one.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
Brennan was. I'm sorry to interrupt you both. I think Brennan was the first one to say that to me, and I'm pretty much parroting what he said to me to make that clear. I'm not the one that came up with that thought.
I was gonna say the thing that resonates about the indie horror community, especially in regards to authors, is it's and no offense to people who have big multi-book contracts, but if you're writing, if you're writing for that big five, it's not the same as that person who comes home from work, uh, feeds the kids, puts them to bed, and sits down from 9 until they pass out because they have a story in them that they just have to tell, and they know that
Mhm.
best case scenario, that story might pay like 70% of the electric bill next month, and that's it.
Mhm.
You're bleeding it out, and that's and there's so many stories within this community, so many books where you can tell the
Mhm.
blood, sweat, and tears that go into it.
Well, I think you can see that in so many different artistic forms too. When you try to appeal to the masses, no matter what your medium is, you're losing out on so much because something a lot of people struggle with, which I don't know how, but they still do, is it's okay if not everyone likes you. You're not going to be everyone's friend. You're not going to create something that is going to be universally loved. Nobody is.
Hmm.
That's why someone like Stephen King can have thousands of reviews ranging from 1 star to 5 star, and it's fine because it's not for everyone. And I think, especially with horror, you ask most people, do you like horror? And they're like, oh God, no. Oh, that's so gross. Like
Yeah.
only sick people like that. Even though really there's so much horror sneaked into everything, but that's a whole different other subject. But if you're a horror author, you're not in one of the most commercially popular genres. So you already have that stacked against you. But if you do try to go wide and do something to appeal with the masses, you're gonna have lackluster results. Because if the horror itself is watered down to appeal to people who probably don't give a shit to begin with, that you just wrote this story, you're definitely not going to appeal to the horror fans who would have given you a lot more than like I don't know, some housewife in the Midwest who's just like, oh, murder. Ugh. I'll just watch my like real life crime shows or whatever. Those are fine. you know.
Which is also horror.
which is also horror, but it's that way, you know. And I would even argue, like my mom loves operation shows, you know, where they're like really cutting into people, really doing surgeries. It makes me gag. She yells at me for watching gore on screen, and I'm like, okay, the gore is fake. That's all fake. You're watching someone with like hands in their body squishing stuff. Like, how do you not see how disgusting that is?
Or that Dr. Pimple Popper. When I was seeing them.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now that's horror because like I'm cringing, like, oh, I'm gagging just the thought of it.
I got one more question before we go into the closing up questions. Demon and Me. What is that about? I love
Oh,
the cover. It's got a drummer and a demon in the background.
yes. Well, the cover is by Don Noble from
Oh, yes.
yeah, he does the artwork for Rooster Republic.
Mm.
Yeah. So Demon and Me is it was supposed to be published, but I ended up putting it out. I just love the story so much. It's sort of my going back to Connecticut story, you know. It's about this drummer from Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
and she's in her 30s. She's had a really hard life, but she finally made something of her life because she got the hell away from everything she'd ever known, cut off her family, sort of thing. But it's not really a spoiler right in the first page. She gets news. Her mom calls and says, you know, hey, I've got cancer. Can you come home? So of course she says yes, but the problem is that she knows coming from a background filled with addiction, trauma, all sorts of other stuff. You know, she's plagued by demons, you know, from the past that she had to overcome. So she's afraid what's going to happen if she goes back into that environment again. So the story is kind of like it kind of came from the question of, you know, we all have inner demons, but what if they became real? So
Hmm.
it's kind of a psychological horror, and I don't know, there's other stuff going on there too, but it's a pretty dark book, but I really loved writing it. You know, it because I had also moved to Las Vegas for a couple years to kind of get away from, you know, life for a while when things got hard. It is just a great place to do that. Everyone out in Vegas is so cool, and I think a lot of people go there to start over. So you're not the only one. You know, you definitely meet misfits galore, and it's a great place to rebuild yourself, to find yourself again. So
Hmm.
I really had a lot of fun writing that story, and I am glad that so many people like it. I mean, you guys should totally read it.
Well, I'm a drummer, so I mean, kind of got my attention.
Well, I that was one of the only instruments that I ever had a shot in hell of trying to play. I was very bad at it, but I tried. My boyfriend, he knew how much I love drummers, especially John Bonham is like my favorite drummer ever.
Oh, we are meant to be friends. I have a Led
But
Zeppelin tattoo for a reason.
yes, oh, they're the best. But yeah,
Yep.
he bought me a drum set, and I tried to play it. Like I get my headphones on, and I just kind of taught myself. I sounded horrible, I'm sure, but you know, it was all the spirit of trying to do it myself. But my poor drum set got killed in a storm.
Oh no.
So yeah, I was storing it. We had moved, so I was storing it in my dad's shed while we were in between places. So we had this horrible storm and trees were falling, and my dad calls me. He's like, Jen, you might want to check the shed. I know you had some stuff in there. A tree went through it. And I'm like, oh man. Yeah, a tree went through my drum set, like
Oh.
just right through the middle of it. It was horrible.
Oh
I
no.
we buried it, so
Poor drum set.
I know.
So, what are you currently reading, Jennifer?
Well, I've been obviously for Women in Horror Month. I read a lot of women in horror anyway, but I've been only reading them this month.
Mhm.
I read the Candisha Press anthology, the one that got away, which was absolutely awesome. And I also read the I can't even think, The Five Turns of the Wheel by Stephanie Ellis.
Yep.
Amazing story. I love folk horror too, so that one was really great. I also read another book that she did with a couple other ladies, another anthology, Daughters of Darkness. That was very good. And I read I had it on my list for forever, but I was like, damn it, I'm reading it for this month. I read Deep by Alma Katsu. That was awesome. And I was a huge fan of The Hunger anyway. So I knew going in I was going to like this. But I really did like it. It's kind of like, a gothic ghost story, but on the Titanic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was really well done. And I just finished, like 2 days ago, I finished Laurel Hightower's Crossroads.
So good.
Oh, it's so good. It tore me to pieces. It was such a book. So I think I have time for one more book. I'm a very fast reader, as you can tell. I got time for one book. I've got a few on my list, so I just
True crime.
That was one of my ones. Yeah, I really want to read that too.
You gotta read True Crime.
I've got a crazy TBR, which you guys, I'm sure, have the same. So,
we can appreciate that.
Yes.
So basically, our TBRs have become prioritized by what we're reading on this show and then what we're reading on Unburying the Dead. And
I appreciate that you guys do the Christopher Pike cast thing.
Oh, that's just I'm a guest on that.
Oh, okay. But no, I love it. I love Christopher Pike in the 90s. Yeah. Oh my God. I read every book I could. I wish I still had those physical books.
Christopher Pike is done by Cooper Beckett, Becca Futrell, and Cassie Daly. And I don't know their schedule, but I would check them out. Subscribe to the Pikecast, the unofficial Pikecast of Christopher Pike. Can't say it's official because it's online. It's gonna not look good. Oh, Brennan, what are you reading?
I'm actually in the middle of one that you mentioned, the one that got away from Candisha Press.
Yes. I
just finished a little bit earlier Rowan Hill's Date Night Ablaze, and I think that's there's a couple contenders for favorite so far, but that's up there. I was not familiar with anything she's done before, but she's got my attention. Pat, you love Aussie horror. That's Aussie horror. That's
oh, okay.
The Rue with a little bit more human vengeance.
Well, Ellen Baxter talks very highly of her, so
yeah, it's a great anthology. And I mean, to anyone listening who, granted the month's almost over, but if like you can't just think of what would be a really good book that would showcase a lot of diverse women and diverse types of horror, because there's all sorts of different subgenres represented there. Get one of the Candisha Press anthologies. You will find something that you like. I mean, you might not like all of them. Anthologies are like that, but you will find something in there that you like.
Yeah. And it's they always do such a good job of meshing familiar names with new names. Like, I'm enjoying my ride so far, and I know that I've still got Sonora Taylor coming up, that she's going to knock my socks off.
Her story is so good. It is so good.
I haven't read any of her stories that aren't, so.
Well, I'm a cook as well. Her story has a lot to do with cooking. I will just say that. So if you enjoy cooking or even enjoy eating very nice food, you should read this. Yes.
Nico Bell, speaking of food horror, came out with Fright Food last year through the Rewind or Die series.
Oh, I can't wait to get started. There's been so many on that list, the Rewind or Die, that I need to read.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's my turn. So I got 30 minutes left in the audio version of Stephen Graham Jones's. It's my first Stephen Graham Jones book, The Only Good Indians. That book is so fucking good.
He is one of my favorite authors. I love him so much. I'm almost Annie Wilkes-ish about him. Don't tell him that I said that.
It's all right. He probably isn't listening to the show.
Like he's, and I hadn't heard from him until I started on the Twitter writing community.
Same.
And so I read Mongrels a year or so ago. Mm-hmm. I am not a werewolf person. I just never have been. They're just like to me. But that book was one of the best books I've probably ever written, werewolf or not. It was so good. And I loved The Only Good Indians too. Yes.
It's a lot different than anything I've ever read. And yeah, I'm listening to an audiobook and I'm saying I read it. Sue me.
Audiobooks are books.
I know that some people are touchy about that, so I don't care.
You're getting the story into your head.
Yeah.
There's people that are touchy if you don't read a physical book. But you know what? I live in a very small apartment and I don't have room for all the physical books or really the money to buy all the physical books I would want to buy. That's why I have my Kindle. Soar so much, and the Kindle books are super cheap in comparison. I can read much more than I ever could if I was having to buy paperback prices, you know?
Yeah, same. I only got one bookshelf, and I had to store most of my Stephen King books in this really nice storage bin. It's like waterproof and stuff because I need more room for my indie stuff. And now I'm getting super picky with my physical books because I just don't have the room.
Yeah.
I hear you. And I'm also reading Fear by Ronald Kelly. We will be recording that episode, and I think I can announce this now, with a first-time guest host. He goes by Well Red Beard. So about to say his real
Oh,
name.
yay.
Yeah, so he's gonna join us for that episode, so that'll be fun. And
Mhm.
the other book I'm reading is the Christopher Pike one. But after that, getting on Todd Keisland's book. Can't think of it on the top of my head. Brennan, can you think of it?
Life Transparent.
There you go, buddy.
Mhm.
We got
Such
him
a
on.
great title, too.
Yeah, we got him on next week. Can't wait to talk to him. Jennifer, last question is, what are you currently working on?
Well, I'm working on it's sort of a top secret, but because until I get like everything finalized for a novel, I don't like to talk about it because then I'll
There.
jinx myself. But I do have a novel that I'm brushing up, getting ready, getting cleaned up for Silver Shamrock. But I also have a short story that'll be coming out sometime this year uh, on the next Candisha Press volume. So it'll be volume 4, as yet untitled. And for The Night She Fell, which is my horror slash paranormal romance type thing,
Nice.
I've got the self-published sequel coming out this fall called She Who Destroys. And also much closer, I've got in May through Redisque Publishing, I've got a YA trilogy. It's a dark fantasy trilogy. The first book called The Mother We Share is coming out, and I should have a cover and information about it soon. But I'm really excited for this one because it's actually the first book that I wrote, like the first real book that I wrote
Oh,
that's coming
nice.
out. Yeah, it's coming out now because, publishing is crazy. What you write first doesn't necessarily always come out first. But it's sort of based on a story that, because we're a horror loving family, my sister used to tell her kids to the point where they get scared and they call me up on the phone. Auntie Jen, she said the green eyed girl's coming to get us again and she's in the closet. So I guess that planted a seed because the first book I wrote, I was like, I should really revisit this idea of this girl haunting other girls while she sleeps. So I did.
That's a good thing about horror. It's free therapy.
Yes.
Uh, where can people follow you?
Well, I have a website. It's jenniferlsoucy.com, and it's got all my links to everything else. It's got all the purchase links for my books on Amazon. Um, I'm very active on Twitter and Instagram, especially. I'm on Facebook, and I do have an author page there, but I really only use that for like family and friends. So it's best if you want to follow like any updates or stuff to do it on Instagram or Twitter, which is usually Banshee Tales. So since that Irish ancestry, I love banshees. So
Right on. I totally dig that. Brennan, any final thoughts?
No, just thank you for spending almost 2 hours with us. We appreciate your time.
oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Any final thoughts, Jennifer?
Just stay tuned. I mean, I've got all sorts of stories that I'm working on and coming out with, and I love talking about anything horror. So even if it's not about my books, feel free to hit me up wherever, send me a message. I don't care. Well, I shouldn't say send me a message. I'll be flooded. But you know where to reach me if you want to talk about things. So.
Brennan, why don't you tell us real quick what hat you're wearing for audio listeners? I can't see it.
Oh, so we've got a Black Hills Press from Shane Hawk hat, as
Nice.
opposed to Patrick's T-shirt. I'm glad to see you changed your shirt. Good work there.
Yeah, I'm wearing a shirt for a project I'm working on. If you want to see it real quick, it's
Very
blurry.
blurry.
Awesome.
I'm
Great
wearing
camera.
I'm wearing Freddy on a tarot card.
Nice. Well played.
That's pretty
Thank
sweet.
you.
So,
I only got to wear it once for Halloween. That's not enough.
my final thoughts are this. Please go look at and listen or watch, whatever you prefer, both, to our last episode with Tim McGregor. And after listening to this episode, well, I'm not sure which one is exactly next, but it's either Jared Barbie, one of the co-founders of Death's Head Press, or Todd Keisland to talk about that newer book. And who the hell knows what else we'll talk about. It's Todd Keisland, so that guy can talk for hours. Jennifer, thank you for almost being here for 2 hours. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, anytime. I'd love to talk some more about anything else.
Well, you have a welcome back pass from us. Brennan, thank you as always for being my co-host. Listeners, we appreciate you spending this time with us, bringing us with you wherever you are going at the moment. Thank you, and please stick around for the next episode.